All right, so let's talk about assumptions, ethics, and piracy. We're going to get through all these slides today. Sorry, because it's a one lecture week. We can't do any programming this week, but at least you're doing some in your assignment. So let's talk about some non-programming things, but we'll tie it back to computer science anyway. Okay, so let's talk about first arguments, just making an argument, and like the assumptions that come with it as you're making one, because I'm going to try and answer this question for you in this little set of slides or in this little subsection. Somebody's like yelling at you, you're arguing with somebody about something, and you want to know, or you're just reading it on the internet, you want to know how good that argument is. Right? I want to teach you how to like pick out good arguments and know when they're not good, right? And if you're the one making the argument, you have to say exactly why it's a bad argument, or maybe it's your fault. So if like somebody's yelling at you and you disagree with them, you can't just say like you're wrong and call it a day. That's not an argument. You have to give a counter argument to their argument. Okay, so find a way to break down their whatever they're saying and make it convincing. Okay, so one nice thing that you can attack about somebody else's argument is their assumptions that they're making as they're arguing. So you can say, no, your assumptions are wrong, and here's why. And that is a valid way to like win. Okay, so an assumption, I assume we know this word. An assumption is just what's being taken for granted, right? So let's see. For example, my silly examples. If I go and I buy a birthday candle because it's my birthday, you can't sue the manufacturer if you try to like have a pool party birthday and light the candle underwater, right? Because surely you're not going to go and use a candle underwater. Everybody assumes that that's true, right? That's just a normal assumption, I would assume. Likewise, if you're going to have dinner at a restaurant and you make a reservation, what's the assumption of the restaurant? What's the point of having that option? It's like, okay, surely this guy is going to show up at the time that he reserved, and he's going to give us lots of money. Yeah, that's the whole reason reservations exist, because the restaurant's assuming that. Same for like ordering a pizza. They're assuming you're going to come pick it up and pay for it. Yeah, so that's the idea. And then here's my silliest idea, just to drive the point home. Let's say that for some reason, I support a ban on parakeets running for office in the U.S. And I go and I stand like outside of the bus loop, and I hold a sign saying "No parakeets for U.S. office." And so, as you look at me, you have many ideas running through your mind. Probably at that point, you'll probably make a few assumptions. You got three options, right? One is like, I am crazy. I've had a mental breakdown because I have too many essays to grade. Or you might think that some parakeets have wronged me in the past, because like why would I be specifically talking about them? So maybe we think that I don't like parakeets for some reason. Or if you think I'm actually sane still, then your assumption's probably this one. You're thinking like maybe, okay, if he's out here and I assume that he is sane, there really must be a way for parakeets to run for office. And in that case, maybe he has a point, okay? Otherwise, I wouldn't be wasting my time out here, okay? So there are many assumptions that might be going through your mind, and if you get to control the assumptions that somebody else is making as you're arguing, that's an easy way to win, okay? So we'll get to that. But I think you understand what an assumption is by now. It's just probably common sense. But here's a question for you. Please go to the buy clicker page, and I'll stop the attendance after we finish this as well. So make sure you tell me you're here. But here is my question for you. Please get into groups and help each other with the answer. But let me explain it first. So here is an argument. All right. Let's see. Senator Franklin. I stole this from the internet. Senator Franklin is a member of the Orange Party. Apparently, the Orange Party supports increased military spending by the federal government. Okay. And then the argument is, based on that, Franklin will surely vote for a cut in spending on social programs. All right. So that's the argument in these two bullets. So read it, pick it apart, and let's say that you only have 5 options. Which of these 5 is the best assumption that this argument is making? What's underlying it? What is this argument assuming? Which of these is the best option, assuming that those are the only options? Okay, so pick it apart, see if you can figure it out, and we'll come back and discuss. Right? It's a little subtle. See if you can figure it out. There's one good option. There's one best option. I promise. So help each other find it. Another minute or so, we'll come back.
What password do we get?
Gosh. I think it's password with a capital P and an @ sign for the A. Alright, get your answers in. My timer has like 8 seconds left on it. We'll see what we're thinking. And after we make sure you've logged in for attendance as well. I'm going to stop that right after we look at this. Alright, let's see. Let's see if we all agree. Ooh. We are gravitating towards B, but a few of us, none of us like D, but a few of us picked the others. Okay. So, let's see here. And yes, B is the right answer. So good. And let's talk about why. Okay, so eventually B is the right answer. So good job if you got that. Let's talk about why the other ones don't work. Okay. So, okay. Can somebody who didn't pick A tell me why they didn't? What's wrong with it? Yeah. Is it not the best one?
A is it's kind of a given assumption, I guess. It's only relating to the first point.
Good. Yeah, that's going to be a key here. Does everybody see that? So Senator Franklin is a member of the Orange Party, which supports increased military spending by the federal government. And then the conclusion of this argument is saying something about social programs. Can you see that? If A were true, all we could conclude from this fact is that Senator Franklin will vote for increased military spending, right? Nothing about social programs. You see how there's no link? Like this is like bullet 1, and this is like bullet 2. There is no link between the two, and A does not, or with A, assuming A. Does that make sense to us? That's going to be the reason. All right, so if A was the right assumption, then that would just say, like, Franklin would support military spending. But no, we're trying to say something about social programs, and so that doesn't work. Okay? And so C is very similar with that. If Senator Franklin agrees with the policies of his party, sure, that's a bit more personal about him, but again, that's talking about military spending, because that's what we know his party is agreeing with, right? Military spending has nothing to do with social programs. This C does not link the two. You see that? That's the idea. D is kind of also not very useful. If the Orange Party has the majority in the Senate, that just means maybe they can get what they want passed. It says nothing about what this senator is going to do. Right? It's like he's going to vote for whatever he wants to vote for, but maybe they'll get it passed. But this is not the right assumption. It's not linking the ideas. Okay, that's what's going on there. Let's see. This one is getting close. E is getting close. If we assume that he opposed spending on social programs, like that would give firepower for this bullet. But at the same time, it's not the best answer because it has nothing to do with the first. Like, why even say the first thing if this is the right assumption? Do you see that? Because again, it's not linking. It's not talking about military spending. It's not linking the two. See the problem? B is the right answer because that's the only one that's linking the two. It's like, all right, the only way to increase military spending by the federal government is to cut spending on social programs. That's the one way. That's the only reason you should have wasted your breath and said both of these bullets. That's the only reason, if we assume that these are the only options. That's the only reason why there's a link. Okay, it's the only thing getting us from military spending to social programs, and so that's the best assumption. Okay, any questions about that? That's going to be why the other ones you can just knock them all off, and so B is the best one. Okay. So yeah, it's not, we got it, but arguments in real life, hopefully you're paying attention to those assumptions as well. You can knock them down. All right? Think about getting the other person's head, okay? Next, I want to talk about ethics. All right? Ethics is an interesting philosophical field of study, and we'll spend some time here, all right? Because just like I asked you in your first little mini essay, I asked you some ethical questions where there is no answer, right? There is no right answer. You just got to argue your point well. Like, how in the world do we resolve them if there is no right answer at all? So I'll try and touch on that. I guess what I'm going to do for these slides, for this little subsection, is I'm going to show you some ways that people approach ethical conundrums, all right? And that's going to help them like figure out what they think is right, okay? Because at the end of the day, it's what you think, and you got to just argue it well. I'll give you some firepower, okay? Before we get there, like this is like you're going to have essays about this kind of stuff, and you already have one. I just want to say with a big disclaimer, as I give you essay assignments in this class, because a lot of them will have ethical problems inside of them, and I'm asking you to like pick a side and explain your side, there is no right answer, and I'm not going to like give you credit. I'm not going to like mark you down if you don't think what I think, okay? That's key. So instead of that, instead of finding a right answer, like parroting what I think, I'll try to not tell you what I think, in fact. Instead, I'm going to try to like get you to be able to argue well. That's the whole point of critical thinking, right? And we'll talk about what it means to argue well. We're getting there. Assumptions is one thing. Also, like I said, my opinions on a topic don't matter at all. As long as you like argue your point well, you can say exactly the opposite of what I believe, all right, in an essay, and I'll still give you 100% if you do the right thing. If you argue it well. Okay, so that is my guarantee to you, and then I'm going to try to make it so that you can't really tell what I think about stuff. I'll try to be very impartial in this class on the topics we talk about, because the whole point is that I want you to think for yourself and examine all the sides yourself. Okay, that's the idea. But some topics I have a very strong opinion on, and you'll figure out which ones. But again, you can think the exact opposite thing to me. So that's my guarantee for you. Don't feel like you need to like parrot my ideas as you may do in some classes. Okay, that does not matter in this class at all. So okay, let's talk about ethics. What it is the study of doing the right thing. Like, what's the right thing to do? That's pretty cool. And so again, there's no right answer. Different cultures think different things. Different people think different things. I'm going to teach you some ethical theories that people use to approach ethical problems, all right? Again, they're not going to give you the right answer. They're going to give you a lens to look at the problem yourself with, okay? That's the goal. So the first one we'll talk about is called a deontological theory, which is a fun word that we've probably never heard before if we haven't taken a philosophy class. This word, like, the first part of it has the word duty inside of it, like a Latin Greek root, duty. And so deontological theories tell you like what you should be doing. Right? No matter what the rules inside a deontological ethical theory, they are absolute. You get no say. You got to do it this way only, and they have to always be followed. The word "always" is going to be key. Okay, so that's a deontological theory. And the other theory that we'll talk about in this class, we'll touch on these two, is utilitarianism, which maybe we've learned about if we took maybe I think like U.S. history or what else? Maybe economics. You learn about this. And utilitarianism is when you consider the utility, right? The utility of what you're doing, utility of your actions. And so you try to measure at least how much good, how much happiness could like doing this thing this way produce versus doing it this other way. And that's what you use to guide yourself as to what you should do. So those are two main theories and ways of approaching a problem. We'll talk about concretely both of them. Another thing that you might learn about in again, a history class is the idea of natural rights. We won't touch on that in this class, but you should keep it in the back of your mind. This is like Locke and Hobbes and all that fun stuff, if you remember that from a different class. And that's natural rights is the idea of like we have, just by being humans, we have a set of rights that are just like endowed to us. We get them for free just by being humans that nobody can touch. That's another ethical theory, in essence, okay? And so these are just ways of approaching a problem. You shouldn't just be like, I'm going to be a deontologist. I'm going to be a utilitarianist. That's not really going to get you a good grade in this class. You have to look at all of these viewpoints at once and like pick them apart. Be like, all right, the utilitarians are right on this problem. The deontologists are wrong on this problem. All right, they can each be valid. You can combine the two. It's just going to give you a lens to use to look at the problem yourself and come up with the right answer that you feel is right. Okay? Because there is no 100% for everyone right answer. Okay? So with that, let me teach you about our first ethical theory. It's called Kantianism. By the way, I'm not a philosopher. If you've taken a philosophy class and we talked about this before, just yell at me if I get something wrong. But I'm going to give you what I've read about. So Kantianism is a deontological theory, and deontology again means that like you've got a rule. Like a rule is a rule. You cannot break it. It must always be followed. In Kantianism and deontological theories, oh man, the word always comes up forever. Okay? So what Kant thought was, that's what his name was. Kantianism stems from a dude named Immanuel Kant, and he believed that like you should follow the golden rule essentially. You should act in a way that you would want others to always act. Okay? So again, always is a big deal. This is how we're going to approach ethical problems under the lens of Kantianism. And also, there's no special exceptions. Like, if you think one thing, and that's how everybody should always act, you get no special exceptions. You can never break that rule, right? So that's what Kant thought. And then he also, he tried to argue that both of these bullets meant the same thing. And so he also said in Kantianism what he believed was that you shouldn't just treat humans as a means to an end, like to get what you want. Don't just use somebody to do something for you. Treat them like humans with their own goals and aspirations. And he argued that that was the same as the first bullet, act in a way that you would want others to always act. Okay? So Kantianism is a nice way of viewing a problem. Again, it's just a lens. There are some issues with Kantianism. It breaks down because there are no exceptions. That's like a big deal. So let me show you an example in a couple slides of Kantianism, like one downfall of it. But again, it's just a way of looking at a problem, right? It's good for some things, bad for others maybe. But there's way too many words with Kant in it, so let me just teach you some English right now. So Kant, that's his last name. He came up with Kantianism. His name was Immanuel Kant. That's just the guy, all right? Kantianism was his philosophy, his ethical theory, his way of thinking. You should always do things in one way. You get no special exceptions for yourself. Golden rule kind of stuff. That's Kantianism, the philosophy. Kantian is the adjective, all right? That is describing something in a way that Kant might appreciate. So like that was a Kantian idea. That was a Kantian approach to a problem, right? That's the adjective. And then Kantianist is a person who is a fan of Kantianism, okay? So I'm going to use these words. Now you've seen them once. All right? So a standard example of Kantianism is like a standard ethical problem dilemma would be lying. Kant would be very opposed to lying, right? Because he'd be like, all right, would I want everyone to always lie to me? He would frame it that way, and he'd say, no, absolutely not. So that means I should never lie. No one should ever lie, ever, at all. So that's what Kant would think. Do you see that? See how I'm using Kantianism to say that? Kant would totally be opposed to lying, and so he'd ask the question, should everyone always lie? And he'd be like, absolutely not, no. All right? And so there's a cute example that I saw on the internet of this idea breaking down, because sometimes you should lie, right? There are some cases in which case it's probably better to lie, like if you have kids, Santa, for example, lie to them for a few years. It's Better that way, probably. Another example is that I got from a YouTube video is, let's say, let me make a very colorful example. Let's say here's my house, and here's my front door, and a murderer comes to my house, okay? A murderer comes to my house, and he knocks on the door, and let's say that I still live with my parents, let's pretend, and my mom answers the door. All right, so a murderer comes to my house, and he says to my mom, I'm here to kill Lawton. I'm here to kill Lawton. Where is he? Assume that I'm in the house right now. Okay? So if you were my mom, and you were a Kantianist, you'd be like, oh yeah, he's in his room. Does that make sense? So that's where Kantianism kind of breaks down. You see that? You would probably, anybody who has a child would lie in this situation. Yeah? But at the same time, it's possible that if my mom was a Kantianist, it would have been a good thing. At the same time, maybe it didn't break down. Because let's say, we can frame it this way, let's say that I overhear the conversation and I run out the window. And if my mom lies and she says, oh yeah, he's not in the house, he's outside playing right now, trying to cover for me. And I hear it. I hear this conversation, but I don't hear this, and I'm already out the window. And then the robber or the murderer comes around the house and murders me. And now, because my mom lied, I die. Okay, so there's a flip side to that as well. So maybe my mom shouldn't have lied and said that I was in the house, because I would have run outside anyway. Okay, so I think you would probably, in certain situations, want to lie. And so Kantianism does break down sometimes, but it's a good way of looking at a problem, right? It's a good way of deciding, what should people maybe do? Okay, that's the idea. So that's Kantianism. Any questions about it? It's a deontological theory. It's just a way of looking at a problem. It's not going to give you the right answer. It's your job to come up with the right answer. Okay. Utilitarianism is the flip of that, essentially. Utilitarianism focuses on utility. It's in the word. John Stuart Mill, another philosopher who was big on this, he was a proponent of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is all about focusing on the consequences of your actions. So if you're asking should I lie, you're going to weigh your options, right? It's think about utilitarianism as a scale, all right? And that's the idea. You're weighing the options, figure out which one's the best one for you. So you're going to measure your 2 options, maybe 3 options, however many you have, in terms of how much happiness that they might produce, how much pleasure, how much good that they produce. They're all synonyms, right? What you're trying to do in utilitarianism is you're trying to produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Okay? And that's key. All right? If you're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do, the answer is not the best thing for you only. You have to consider everyone in the universe all at once. Okay? You get no special exceptions for yourself. Again, that's utilitarianism. All right? And it sometimes breaks down because a standard problem of utilitarianism is you're trying to weigh all your options on the entire universe at once. What would happen to everyone on Earth if I lied? What would happen to everyone on Earth if I didn't lie? And it's very hard to do that weighing sometimes. Okay? So a standard example where utilitarianism comes up is the trolley problem. It's would you kill one person to save 50? So you can use this as an example. Use what I'm about to say in your essay if you haven't finished it yet. So to a utilitarian, if they were posed with this problem, it would probably be an easy answer for them. Right? Because they'd be what's the best thing? What produces the greatest good for the greatest amount of people? And they'd probably be all right, every life is equivalent. So 50 is bigger than 1. I'm going to flip the switch. I'm going to make it so that I'm going to kill that one person. That means I'm going to save 50. Right? The utilitarian would be absolutely on board with killing one person to save 50. Right? If that was their situation. Right? But it's all about weighing the options. Sometimes it's hard to weigh those options, because what if that one person that you would have killed was on the verge of curing cancer or something? Right? Then that flips the scale, doesn't it? So it's hard to do that weighing. They would have saved billions of lives potentially, and you should have let the 50 die in that case. Right? So it's hard to do the weighing, but in utilitarianism, usually there's a right answer, and that's obvious. Okay, that's pretty cool. But again, it might break down. So that's utilitarianism. It's just a way of looking at or approaching a problem, just like Kantianism. Right? These are just ways to approach a problem, assess it, start the debate in your own mind. There's no right answer. You can't just be all right, I think this is correct because Kantianism thinks it's correct. That wouldn't get you any points on an essay. You use the ideas as firepower. All right? That's the idea. That's where I'm going with that. So are there any questions about those two kinds of ethical theories? You got Kantianism, you got utilitarianism. All right. I just have a silly example to keep it in your mind. Let's go through. Let's explore the Pokemon world because I'm a millennial. So let's come up with the ethics of Pokemon. Is it a good thing to like train Pokemon and become a Pokemon master? Right. So let's legitimately explore this. All right. So all right, if you send first of all, maybe we're not all comfortable with the idea of Pokemon. So let me just explain it quickly in case it's not part of your childhood like it was part of mine. So Pokemon is just a universe where there's some little magical beings, little animals that you can catch. You can train them. You can force them to fight each other. You can go to little Pokemon gyms, and that gives you badges, and that like increases your status as a Pokemon trainer, as the human who owns the Pokemon. But there's also wild Pokemon living out just in the trees and stuff. That's kind of the idea. And like the goal of a human in that world is like to catch every Pokemon and train them and become the Pokemon master. Okay, that's the idea. So now you know. So Kant, what would he think? He's all about like you should think the same thing. You should have the best intentions. You should like duty. Think duty whenever you hear Kant. Think the word always. It stems from duty, deontology. Think the word always. Okay, so Kant would like. Here are some ethical questions from the Pokemon universe. Should we always Kant would be like, should we be domesticating? Should we be catching wild Pokemon and forcing them to fight each other? So should we always domesticate them? He'd always ask the question. He'd put the word always in it. Should we always domesticate wild Pokemon? And Kant is all about not using things as a means to an end. People, let's pretend that Pokemon are equivalent to people. So Kant is all about individual rights, like don't mess with somebody, treat them like humans. So he would probably say no. He should be like, probably shouldn't domesticate wild Pokemon. And so be like, there should be no catching and training of them. That's probably what Kant would think. Okay. Though he would ask some questions to himself at the same time. Like maybe that's too soon. He was jumping the gun because you could argue as well. Like he would have this conversation in his mind. Like wouldn't a Pokemon maybe have a better life if we domesticated them? Like domesticated animals in our universe live longer in captivity in a zoo. This is also a utilitarian concept, so they do like intermingle. So like there's a pro and con list to that. Like animals live longer in captivity maybe, but as a con, like they're less free, they have less say in their lives, they can't roam around as far. Another idea is like Pokemon are more healthy maybe if we train them and force them to fight other Pokemon. They level up, and so maybe that would be better for them in the end. So he'd be thinking like that. But probably he's for individual rights, so at the end of the day, he'd probably argue, probably not a good idea, right? And then also, he'd ask the question, should we always be using Pokemon to further our dream of being the Pokemon master, catching all of them, fulfilling our Pokédex? And he'd be like, no, probably absolutely not, in fact, because that's using Pokemon as a means to an end, which is something he's clearly not on board with, okay? So just go back to the slide. This is a colorful idea, but hopefully it's making some sense. This is how Kant would approach these problems. Then you'd use that as firepower. Be like, oh yeah, Kant's right and here's why. Or Kant's wrong and here's why. All right. Should we work to eliminate, like there's a terrorist group in the Pokemon universe called Team Rocket. Should we always be working, like training our Pokemon, having them fight the Team Rocket members to try and get rid of them? And he'd be asking the question, like, he'd frame it as, should we always be trying to prevent harmful things? And the answer would be yes. So maybe that influences, like, should we be training Pokemon? We can use them to fight Team Rocket. So again, there's a give and take everywhere. But at the end of the day, Kant would approach problems with the word always in his questions. Should we always be doing something? Because we get no special exceptions. Okay, any questions about that? So Kant is all about having the best intentions, always. You have some duty and you should follow that duty for forever. Okay, that's the idea. All right, we can send Pokemon, the idea of Pokemon to Mill as well. John Stuart Mill, who was a utilitarian, and he would focus on the consequences of a problem. So whenever you see this guy's name, think utility. Think how much good could you produce. Think utility. Okay? So he'd be asking these questions. He'd be like, all right, what do we gain by owning Pokemon and having them as our own? what do they lose? Because there's a scale there. Like, you got to weigh these ideas, all right? So it's really a pro and con list for a utilitarian, and that's how they figure out which side to go down. So like a con of owning Pokemon and catching them is like they are less free. That decreases the total utility of the universe. See that? You got to consider it all at once. But a flip side of that, a pro is like that allows, like with a Pokemon, and if we level it up and we use them for, like, we own them, have them fight each other and we gain badges, that allows us to rise up in status as humans, which might be good for the Pokemon too, because they're like that unlocks special like Pokemon resorts. They have that in the anime, for example. And so maybe that ends with both of us being treated better in the end. Who knows? So you gotta weigh all those things. There's no right answer. You gotta pick which side has the most weight. Okay. Another ethical question is like, should we be forcing Pokemon to fight each other because that's how they level up? All right. So again, a utilitarian would make a pro-con list. Like, all right, a pro would probably be that leveling up a Pokemon makes them healthier. Like they're working out at the gym technically, or literally. And then a con of that would be like, should we really be forcing Pokemon? Like, it's not good to be forcing them to fight each other. Maybe that's not good for anybody. That's a problem. That's stressful for them potentially. So again, it's a weighing that you have to do, and there's no right answer. Just like you're using these ideas to formulate your own idea. Does that make sense? That's the idea. That's where we're going with that. So that's the ethics of Pokemon through the lens of both of our philosophers, both of our boys, Kant and Mill. If we're good, I have essentially one more main topic. It'll take a while to get through, though. Are we ready to switch gears and talk about something different? But we'll use ethical theories to talk about it. This is finally computer science. So let's talk about piracy. All right, piracy. And what is piracy on the internet? It's a theft of what's called intellectual property. So we have to define that as well. Okay, so I'm going to try and answer these questions for us in this little subsection of the day. I'm going to give you some history of piracy on the internet, just in case you're not aware. We'll talk about why it's so hard to stop people from pirating things. And then we'll also try to use our ethical theories, because this is a computer science class. We learn some philosophy. Let's apply it to computer science. This is very near and dear to our hearts. So let's talk about it. So piracy is the theft of intellectual property, and let's define that. So intellectual property is a fun name. It's a very vague sounding word. It's somebody's creative work, so like a piece of art, like music, for example. That was like a big deal. Music, movies, stuff like that. It's a creative work, even programs, but you can't touch it. It's intangible. All right, that's what intellectual property is. It's like it was formulated in somebody's head, and you can download it. So intellectual property is protected under various laws. You got copyrights. You can copyright a book, for example, an ebook, an audiobook. You can patent your ideas. You can patent like computers, patent machines that you make, patent programs even that you write. You can also trademark things. So like you can't use the Apple logo in your own company because Apple would sue you. That's their trademarked symbol. Okay, there's that. You also have trade secrets. That's why like NDAs exist. If you sign a non-disclosure agreement and you work somewhere and then you quit your job and you go work somewhere else, you can't use the secrets that you know from your previous job for a certain number of years. Okay, there's that. And then, software is patentable, for example. Music is another example of something you can download. It's intellectual property. Those are two examples of that. But copyrights and patents are the main form of how it's protected, and then you gotta go to the courts, all right? But there is a difference, right? If it's not physical, what does it mean to steal intellectual property, right? That's a huge question for us, because in the real world, if you steal something, like you go and you rob a bank, right? You steal a bag of money. That means the bank does not have that bag of money anymore, yeah? That's stealing in real life. Should stealing and piracy, which is essentially copying intellectual property, should we be treating that the exact same? Because the equivalent of piracy on the internet is like taking a bag of money from somebody and you're just making a copy. The other person still has the bag of money. Now there's two bags, okay? Now there's two versions of the same song that you just downloaded. Somebody else's computer has it, and now yours has it too. So should it be treated the same? And so there are like some some silly like commercials about like you wouldn't download a car, and the meme example is like I would if I could, right? But it's different, isn't it? It's not like you're robbing somebody and they don't have it anymore. Like you're not like stealing a CD from a store. You are legitimately making a copy of it, and so nobody loses it. You just gain it now. All right. So should it be treated the same is the question. That's for you to think about. All right. So let me teach you some history about piracy on the internet, because now you can, once the internet got invented, like we've linked some computers together, people have files, and now they're sharing files. Okay, so probably the original popular file sharing program, which was illegal, of course, was called Napster. This was its logo. Maybe we haven't heard of it. It's an old one. This is an ancient version of macOS like 9 or 8 or something. Let's see. So what it was just a way where people could share whatever was on their hard drive at the time. Like they have a bunch of files, they can make those files accessible and searchable to the internet, anybody else on Napster, and they could, then other people could search for them. So like here's what it looked like. If I zoom in, this person really loved an old 60s band, apparently. But you could search for like, I want these songs, but I want this artist, I want this song, and then you could see it on, like, this is a bunch of other people's computers, and you could just, like, double-click it to download it. And, like, this person has been downloading a bunch of those things, okay, with very slow internet speeds. So that's what happened. That's how it worked back in the day. It's like people linking their computers together and, like, having these files be shared among themselves. This is called peer-to-peer file sharing, by the way, peer-to-peer. Because it's not like you're connecting to some giant server somewhere. You're connecting to somebody else's computer. And they're the ones sending across the internet that file that you're downloading. Okay? So because it allowed you to share intellectual property, things that people could sue other people over, Napster itself, just by providing the means of people doing illegal things, they got sued and they were shut down in 2001. Okay? So a long time ago. Over 20 years ago now. And then, of course, some other program went and filled the vacuum. Right? There was another program that came out after that called LimeWire. All right, and that one, again, same idea. It's just like it was like Windows Vista or something. You could again search for stuff. This time, this person was searching for a movie, and then they could start downloading that. And like it again is peer-to-peer, connecting to other people's computers. It's like here's a computer, here's a computer, here's a computer. They're all connecting to the LimeWire network. And there are some computers that are like sharing a bunch of stuff, so they're bigger. And like it's just a bunch of people. Like if you're over here, you can search for stuff on anybody else's computer as long as there's a connection. Okay, that's the idea. Peer-to-peer file sharing. Again, that company got sued and they were shut down in 2010, so a little bit later. And then there's a fun example, just for the irony. Let me tell you about it. The LimeWire people. They made this program. There's like a free version of the program, and then they made a pro version of LimeWire that like downloaded things faster, I think. And the ultimate irony was that you could use the free version of LimeWire to search for the pro version of LimeWire and steal that, which is hilarious in my opinion. So that was another file sharing program. Again, shut down, doesn't exist anymore. All right, and let's see. We could use file sharing as like a question, right? Should we be doing this? And we can ask Kantianism and utilitarianism, and we could use either of them to argue both sides. So again, there's no right answer. You could force Kantianism to be a proponent of piracy. You could force Kantianism to you could argue totally that Kant would be against piracy just as easily as you could argue that Kant would be for piracy. But it's just a lens to look through. So let's try and explain that. So again, Kant would be approaching piracy in this way. He'd ask the question with the word always in it. Should you always be able to share content with people that would otherwise cost you money? Okay, so Kant would ask that exact question essentially. And then you could use Kantianism to argue both ways. And here's how. Like you'd be like, yes, you could say yes. Kant would be like for piracy, for sharing things, because maybe you could say like, yeah, if I make something, I want anybody else to have it too. That sounds like a good deal. Like nothing should have been copyrighted in the first place. Everything should be free. That's one idea. You can use Kantianism to argue that, for sure. On the flip side, you could also say that Kant would say no to this. You could say like, no, if I were a person, I would not want somebody stealing from me always, because that would hurt my livelihood. That's how I make money. Okay, so you could use Kantianism in either way. Do you see that? That's key. There is no right answer. You just got to argue like, yeah, that's what Kant would think, and here's why it's correct. Okay, again, it's on you, the author of the essay. So Mill, a utilitarian, he would be asking some questions about like what provides the greatest good to the greatest number of people. So like what's going to give the most people happiness? What's going to provide the most utility to all the universe at once? Okay, you got to consider everybody, not just you. And so again, it's a pro-con list usually with utilitarianism. So some pros, or a pro of piracy, is that like we're talking millions of people, like people in third world countries that could not ever even afford this MP3. Millions of people who can't afford an album are now able to enjoy an artist's music, assuming we're talking about music right now, right? And so that's a huge win for utility and piracy, is it not? So you could use utilitarianism to argue that piracy is a good idea. And another sentence along those lines is like, maybe some of the people like who wouldn't have bought it anyway, like they're just testing it out. Maybe those people who did steal the album would eventually like it so much that they'd want to support the artist after all. They go and they'd buy it anyway. So that's another pro for utility in piracy. All right. A con though would be like, again, like this is an artist who's making money off of making music, and maybe if enough people, right, if everybody wanted to pirate this album of theirs, maybe that would cause the artist to lose so much money that they would stop making music, and every fan, all the millions of fans of that artist, would be so sad that would cause a huge decrease in total utility. That outweighs the piracy. You see that? So you could use utilitarianism to prop up either side. You just have to argue it well. It's just a lens. It's a way of approaching and framing a problem. Does that make sense to us? That's the goal there. Okay? So please yell at me if you have any questions about this. I know it's kind of vague. If a lot of us are STEM majors, this is not normal stuff for us to think about, but we're going to get good at it in this class. All right? So let's talk about present-day piracy. So present-day piracy, I would argue that BitTorrent is the biggest way that people pirate things these days. So let's talk about that. So BitTorrent is kind of interesting. You can't really shut it down because there isn't any real centralization to BitTorrent. It's just like people connecting to other people's computers, and you can't the only way to take something off of the BitTorrent network would be to delete it from everybody's hard drive all at once, and that's impossible. Okay. Also, it's just a protocol for file sharing. There's no one program that's BitTorrent. There's millions of programs, or hundreds probably, of programs that you could use to connect to the BitTorrent network. It's a file sharing protocol. Right? And the word protocol just means it's a way of transferring information on the internet. So for example, like our class website, we connect to that through the HTTPS protocol. All right? As long as you have a server, you can serve that. All right? So HTTPS, that's just a protocol. It's a way of transferring information to a browser, for example. FTP is a way of transferring files to a browser sometimes. That's an older protocol. BitTorrent is just another protocol, and if you have a server somewhere, you could start giving files to people, right? And so the way that you access BitTorrent is you go to a website and you download a little file that tells you where to find the file you really want. It tells you how to connect to some people who already have it. And that's the part that's getting shut down constantly. A bunch of websites where you can download BitTorrent files to start off the piracy downloading process. Those are getting shut down, but others are just popping up in their place. Because that's very simple to make one of those. So that's BitTorrent. That's essentially why it's so hard to shut down. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And then also BitTorrent it's just a file sharing protocol. It's used for also legal things. It's a good protocol for certain things. For example, this screenshot is a BitTorrent program of somebody downloading a Linux distribution, which is something that it's a free operating system. It's meant to be shared, all right? And BitTorrent allows you to download it probably much faster than it would be on the maker's website, because you can connect to a bunch of people at once and start downloading that free thing. So it's not meant only for piracy. A lot of people use it so that they don't have to pay for a lot of what's it called, transmission fees if you own a server. So that's pretty cool. People are just downloading it from each other at that point. So that's BitTorrent. That's present day. We've made it. And that's kind of the idea. Okay. So piracy. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? You'll have to decide. Let's have another topic. I think this will be a fun one for us as well. Very near and dear to your heart. Should you, here's an ethical question for you, should you download textbooks from the internet as like PDFs or something without paying for them? All right. As a student, this is a very important question for you, right? So let's focus on this topic for a couple slides. So I'd like you to think about this ethical idea, this ethical conundrum. I'd like you to think about what are some common arguments for stealing textbooks and against stealing textbooks, all right? In the back of your mind, also, I want you to remember the idea of assumptions, right? If somebody wants to steal a textbook, like what's the assumption of somebody who's stealing it? What's the assumption of somebody who doesn't like stealing textbooks, all right? I'm going to ask you about this on the next slide. What is this? Empty box. Weird. And then, also, like you have a bunch of ways to approach this problem now. I've given you a bunch of ways. What would our boys think? What would the utilitarian say about this? Mill? What would Kant say? Like he would ask you a question with the word always in it, right? So, okay. Here's my question for you. Let's see here. Remember our ethical theories if you can, if you wrote them down. But here's my question for you. I'd like you to go to the written ice page, please. I'm going to clear it out for us. Boop. So here's the secret. Don't post anything. You can like go there as a group because I'm going to put you into groups again. So here's your ethical question. Should you download textbooks without paying for them? Okay, that's your question. And I'm going to ask you to do just a text version of a debate. All right. So I'm going to give you and your group a stance. All right. A stance. I'm going to say yes. You should answer yes to this question. Come up with arguments saying yes, and come up with arguments saying no. All right. And I'll give you some time to write that down. But I need to give you a stance in just a second. All right. So I'll also talk to you about counter arguments. I want you to bash down your own arguments after you come up with some, right? And then we'll discuss. So here's the idea. Once you get together as groups, all right, so don't do this yet. Once you get together as groups, designate somebody to be the person who writes stuff down, your ideas, all right? And then only one of the people in your group will go to this page, and then just like type nothing, just have a blank post and click submit. All right? Once you do that, it will give you a group number. Okay? And if you end up being a group number that is odd, I would like you to say yes to this. Yes, you should download textbooks without paying for them. That's your stance. If you're an even group, you'll say no, you should not. And I'd like you to write down a couple good arguments for your stance, please. At least two, let's say. All right? So take a few minutes to get into groups, press that submit button to get a group number, and then you can start filling this in with some arguments in favor of what I've asked you to think. All right? So if you're an odd group, you'll be like, here's some arguments for why you should be able to do this. It's a good thing. Piracy is a good thing for textbooks. If you're an even-numbered group, come up with some arguments, write them down, saying, no, you should not be able to do this. It's a bad thing. Okay? So take a few minutes to get together and do that. All right? Let me know if you have any questions. Please write them down. Plenty of time. I'll give you 5 minutes. Ideas. You're just arguments for your stance right now. We'll come up with counter arguments later.
Someone else can do it.
Couple more minutes for this part. Yes. All right. Your voice is slowly dying. So let's switch gears now. You've written some arguments in favor of your chosen stance. Now you can do it on the same page. You can just add to it and press submit again if you'd like. Now I'd like you to come up with at least one good counter argument to one of the arguments you already wrote. Argue against yourself, please. Okay? One would be good, but more if you can. Okay? I'll give you a couple more minutes to think about that. Try to bash down the arguments you just came up with now. It's good practice. Alright, that is my timer. Let's come back. Let's see what we're thinking. We'll discuss. Press submit if you haven't already, so I can see them. Got a bunch of blank groups right now. There they go. Sweet. So, okay. Got an odd group. Oh, thank you all for pressing submit now. So let's do 77, let's say. So that was an odd group saying, yes, we should have piracy. So some arguments. I like that we use Kantianism maybe for both. Kantian argument, textbook should always be free. That's probably what Kant would say. Good, and you could prop that up with some more arguments too. Mill would say free books would reduce the cost of education, making it affordable to all. Yeah, an increasing total utility. That's better. Nice. And then I like that you did Kantian and utilitarian arguments for the opposite too. I like that a lot. Not paying for textbooks. Same thing as theft. I'd probably want to see the word always somewhere. Like you should always want to pay for a textbook because like I wouldn't want to have myself stolen from if I made one. Utilitarian arguments. Publishers would have no incentive to create new editions. Putting education in a decline. Good, yeah. Same to my my example from the albums. That's a great utilitarian example. Let's do an even group. Let's maybe group 80. So an even group said, no, we don't like piracy. So what are some good arguments against piracy? You shouldn't download for free because doing so would take away money from whoever manufactures that textbook. That's a great argument. Yeah, that would not be good. There could be a risk in downloading them for free. That's a good one. I haven't heard that one yet. All the semesters I've been teaching this class. That's a great idea because maybe it's a virus. Like you just download. It's not PDF. It was .exe or something. You couldn't tell. Could possibly contain the wrong version of the textbook or worse, a virus. Great argument. Yeah, so those are some good reasons to not want to do that. And then a counter argument to one of those. Let's see. As a student, it would save you a good amount of money considering you may already have to pay for tuition and class fees. Yeah, that's a great idea. If you're already a student, you would want to steal probably because like you're already in so much debt. Why get more in debt? Okay, so I don't have time to look at all of your ideas, but I heard your thoughts as you were talking, so they were great. There were some good ones that I heard, and so I hope that was helpful for you because what this discussion was doing is it was helping you, even if like you didn't think one way, it was helping you like get in the mind of somebody who thought something else than you, right? That's a great way of getting firepower for your own ideas. Like this is what the other side would have said, and now I'm going to shut them down. Okay, that's what you got to get good at. That's how you make a good argument. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions about any of that? That's a great start. That's where we're going in this class. So here are some ideas that I came up with and wrote down ahead of time. Some arguments for like piracy. Maybe the idea is like one good argument is like the publisher is charging way too much money. This book is just a few black and white pages. Like if I printed that at like Kinko's or whatever the name of the place is these days, it would probably cost me $20, and it's $200 for this textbook. That makes no sense. That's wrong. That's silly. An assumption of this argument, though, let's think about the assumptions that are underlying this argument. The assumption is that the publisher has control over the price, and they're the ones extorting you. Right? Maybe maybe that's not true. There could be a counter argument there. Maybe that's not true. Like if the book was $40 and it was in color, maybe that they are really just like you're paying the cost of the printing of the textbook and maybe $5 is going to the author. Maybe that is fair. Okay, so that's an argument for, an assumption behind it, bashing it down. An argument against would be like, well, the authors of a book should be rewarded for their efforts. I would want to be rewarded if I wrote a textbook, right? But the assumption underlying the argument is like the authors did a good job writing that textbook. I'm sure we've all read textbooks or been forced to read them that were really horribly written, right? And so that would not be correct under if you're talking about that particular book that's in your mind. But you could also have the flip side of that. You can counter argue, like be like, that's not true when like the book was not helpful at all, or it was badly written, and you didn't enjoy what the authors made. So like you could bash that down in that way if that applied. And then you could also like some of us did, and great job. You could approach this from the viewpoint of our philosophers, our ethical theorists. So you could ask Kant, like, what he thought, and he would formulate this question probably. He'd be like, should we always steal textbooks? And again, you could use him to claim both sides, right? You could totally say that Kant would be like, yes, if I wrote a book, I want everybody to have it. That's totally fine with me. Yes, knowledge should always be free. You could also say no. If I wrote a book, Kant would be like, maybe, I kind of want money for that. I spent a lot of time on that. So that hurts the author. That would hurt me. It's not fair, so I should never steal. Okay, I wouldn't want it stolen from me. So again, you could use both. You could argue both sides, usually, with the same ethical theory. And so that's why there is no right answer. You just gotta argue your point well, bash down the other side in your essays. Right? A utilitarian would ask, like, what's the utility in stealing a textbook? Is this a good thing? Does it produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people? And so it's always a pro-con list there. Usually, it's like. Sure, you could say, yeah, a utilitarian Miller would say, yeah, you should steal textbooks because it saves money. There's way more students than there are people who wrote the books, so it saves money and increases the total utility. The people who are stealing the stuff far outnumber the authors, and their utility is going up. So that would be in favor of stealing. You could also argue the flip side. You could claim that no, total utility for the entire universe goes down because it hurts the authors. That ruins how much money they make, whether or not they're going to make a good textbook again, because maybe that was like the best textbook ever. Now they won't make it anymore because they're not getting money for it. So that's another idea. Okay, but again, you can come up with anything as long as you argue your side, bash down the other side. That's kind of like a good formula for a good argument. Okay. So, are there any questions about any of that? That was ethics and piracy, applying our theories to something we know about, something computer sciencey. All right, if we're good, I have a new writing assignment for you because I forgot when the first one's due. It's either this week or next week. Let's see, when was it due? The 16th. So it was already due. Okay, cool. In that case, this one, now you need a new one. So this will be due week 4. Here's your new essay assignment. It's going to be due week 4, the 30th. So similarly, like Tuesdays will be the essay due dates in this class. So the 30th is when it'll be due. So you got over a week, almost 2 weeks to do it, and you can look at it now if you'd like. So here's your silly little essay. Do take it seriously though. It's going to be fun for me to read though. Your essay, the title is "College is Useless." Right. So I would like you to write 750 words, and I'd like you to argue the following. All right, pay very close attention to this. I would like you to argue exactly this, that college is completely useless and not worth going to. All right, that is what I want to hear your arguments for in this class. All right, you have to say that it is useless. You cannot argue that, oh no, I like college, it's great. I will give you a 0. Okay, you have to argue that college is useless. Does everybody understand? Cool. All right. Because you're in your seat right now in a college, you probably don't completely agree with this. And that's exactly why I'm giving you this essay. You have to learn to think like the other side, okay? You have to figure out, you have to look at the opposite perspective because you need to learn how to bash down their ideas, right? You have to argue this prompt. You can't say you disagree. You should counter-argue what the other side might say, the people who love college, what maybe you think deep down, okay? I want to hear some counter-arguments to those things. So, all right. So here's how I want the essay structured. It could be in any way. I'm not requiring you to cite anything yet, so don't worry about citations if you don't want to cite anything. So you can structure the essay however you want, as long as I can read it. The following caveat is this is your one requirement in addition to 750 words, right? You must mention what Kant would think, and you must mention what Mill would think. You must talk about Kantianism and utilitarianism, both, somewhere in your essay, okay? I want to see those terms written down. And you better explain why Kant and Mill would take those viewpoints. You can't just be like, oh yeah, Kant would say this, and then move on. You have to say why Kant would say that. I'm testing you on whether you've understood these theories. So ask me questions if you don't understand them, please. Okay? So I'll give you credit if you say why. You got to say why, okay? And so here's like an example. If you say Kantianism thinks this, Kantianism is totally on board with college being useless. In that case, like use it as firepower. Be like, this is why it's correct. This is why Kant would be right. Or if you've determined that Kantianism is a bad thing, Kant would be like, yeah, I love college. We should all go to college. If you really think that Kant would say that, then you have to bash his ideas down. You have to discuss why your argument is still correct, even though Kant would say the other thing. Does that make sense? So talk about both viewpoints, talk about why they would say that, and either use them to prop your idea up or bash it down, or bash their idea down, okay? Because it's a counter argument. Okay, that is your essay, 750 words on that. Format you can read, style I don't really care too much about. You could do whatever you want to format your essay, write it however you want. You can submit it as a text entry or a file upload. If you want to be fancy, there is a programming language to write essays that all the cool kids use. It's called LaTeX. There's a tutorial on that. If you want to go crazy and learn that, go for it. But you can just write it however you normally write it. That's fine. Eventually, if you're like a math major or you want to go to grad school, you'll eventually have to learn this anyway. So that's an idea. We'll talk about citation requirements later when I ask you to cite something. But the one thing I also want to say finally before we end is that in this class, you're writing formal essays, all right? So I'm going to mark you down if you use any contractions. This is something my English professors did that they drilled into me. I'm just forcing you to do it too. I'll mark you down if you use any contractions or you speak very informally in your writing, like you're talking to a friend or something. This is a very formal essay, okay? So I'll mark you down a little bit if you speak informally, okay? So that is my warning to you. But that is, I think, everything I wanted to explain. Any last questions about this assignment? Due week 4, the due date's at the bottom. I think it was the 30th or something. Yes?
For the essays, do we have to write it in person or can we write it in first person?
Oh, no, it's totally fine to write in first person. So I'm asking you eventually for your opinion, essentially. So that's totally fine. You can be like, I think college is useless if you'd like to write it that way. That's totally fine. But you'll have to write in third person for other people. Like, Kant would say this. Can't be like, I would say this. Don't pretend to be Kant or anything. Yeah. Any other questions?
Post the lecture slide?
Yes, I post everything. So you should, hopefully you've seen them by now, like lecture 1, for example. You just click the lecture link on our modules page, and you got the video, you got the slides, and the code for coding lectures. Okay, yeah, if we're good, that's all that I got for us. I have one slide down here if you want to, there's a fun website if you'd like to go to it, about some absurd trolley-style problems of the, like, kill one person and save 50. So it's pretty funny if you want to go there, but you don't have to.